150 yards. This is a special pair, and it's a handle full of grace. And it's Energumen opening up a clear advantage in the closing stages. A breath of fresh air over fences is going to stay at the helm of the 2 mile novices. Energumen by.
Boylesports has it all. Money back meetings every day. UK and Irish racing live streaming. Extra places and money back all losers offers. And a bet 10 get 40 welcome offer. Boylesports, this is betting.
So, hello and welcome back to episode number 45 of the Champ.ie podcast for the season. Aintree Day Two, lads. We haven't even got day one out of the picture yet. It's, of course, we are recording at 10:30 on Thursday morning. But looking forward to looking ahead to day two already, lads. Joined by Steve Hamilton once again, Ronan Groome from the Irish Field. And lads, cracking days racing on the Friday. Ronan, what way is the ground looking for the Friday? Because you've been looking at Norwegian weather stations or something of the like, so you might give us an update.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where you're just going to have to wait to see how it rides today. Talking to Paul Townend, actually, would you believe, is my big interview this week. And he was getting off the plane yesterday in Liverpool, and it was raining quite a bit. So we wait to see. I think today is going to be the best gauge of the ground. So they're calling it good to soft at the moment. So we'll try and work off that sort of neutral ground to see where way it comes up.
Absolutely. Well, we're encouraging all the viewers, as always, to get involved. You'll see up on screen the 7 races a day too. So to be able to chance of winning a €20 Boylesports free bet. 3 winners or more into the draw then. When we do eventually have results for Aintree, we'll start drawing winners there. So we'll move on, lads. One horse that will need probably on the softer side of good to be seen at best effect is Jerry Colomb, the 145 at Aintree. He's 10-11 favoured for the shade of odds on for what is the mile weight novices chase, grade 1 over 3 miles and a furlong. Are we looking at Cheltenham form here, Steve, or is there anything else that can get into the mix?
Well, the one horse that could, obviously Jerry Colomb and Bron, they tie in off the Cheltenham run, but complete unknown, the Nichols horse did dot up at Kempton. It was a handicap, but he won with plenty in hand. I do have reservations about him being effective over 3 miles, though. This is nearly 3 miles won. And he's a horse that has got plenty of pace. And he displayed that at Kempton. That was over 2.5. So he is one, though, that could take a further step forward. And he is unexposed. So if he was looking for one outside of the Cheltenham form, he would be it. But again, as we mentioned with a few races yesterday, that is reflected in the prices. And I think the market's got it just about right. I would have Bron slightly closer to Jerry Colomb than they're betting. He weakened at Cheltenham, and I've just got the feeling that he may be a little bit better than that. So I would have them slightly closer together. And basically, I think it lies between those two. Complete unknown is the possible improver.
Yeah, I thought the same, Steve. I did think Bron was maybe to wait aside here. I thought he was last off the bridle. Jumped a lot faster through the air than Jerry Colomb for a large part of that race. And I don't know, Ron, I don't know what you think about Jerry Colomb, but he never seems to be enjoying it for me.
Yeah, he's that type of horse that takes a bit of winding up, I guess. And I think in that regard, the Aintree Straight might suit him a bit more, just to get him going. A few more fences and a longer kind of winding run in there. I know what you're saying about Bron, and he wasn't actually beaten far by Jerry Colomb first time up. The pair of them met in the beginner's chase at Ferryhouse, and then they basically ran to that form more or less again in the Brown Advisory, and Bron is lightly raced. Has had less runs than Jerry Colomb or fences, and could potentially close the gap further now. I tend to agree with kind of Steve's summation that the prices are correct as they are now, and I would be less positive on Bron. I think he's fair enough at around the 3-1 marker thereabouts, and I'm struggling to find a way into the race. What I would say is the race is a quite reasonable record for horses that come out of Cheltenham. And you look at like a High Seigneur, Chantry House, Lost in Translation, Might Bite, Native River, have all come ran well at Cheltenham and come and won here in years gone by. I like Jerry Colombe as a horse. I think he's a Gold Cup contender for next season. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. But don't have a play, to be honest. I can't find an edge on the prices, so I'm happy to swerve this opener.
Yeah, himself and I did think Jerry Colombe, himself and Galli de la Toe, the long run to 2 out, the two of them did get outpaced at Cheltenham. So just worry at maybe Aintree. Is that sort of a sharper track?
He has won over 2.5 miles, so he's a Grade 1 winner at 2.5 miles. Now you can discount the form there, but I wouldn't be too worried about the ground. I don't think Gordon is either. I think he gets away with good to soft ground, and if he can win a Grade 1 at Sandown over 2.5 miles and good to soft, I wouldn't have a huge, in my head, I wouldn't be too concerned about 3 miles 1 on good to soft at Aintree.
Okay, boys, let's move on to what is the 220. It is the first of the Premier Handicaps Class 1 contest. And Caprond heads the betting. Ronan, you're a massive fan of this horse. Went into Cheltenham and looking like he was very well handicapped. The ground, once again, possibly might have went against them. Aidan Coleman takes the ride. No Ordinary Joe, 8-1 in the market. Next down, Buddy One, who ran a massive race for the Gilligans at Cheltenham in the Martin Pipe. He's 9-1. Captain Combi, 9-1. And it's 10-1 and big at the rest. Big field, 22 runners. Does Caprond come out on top this time, or is the ground going to go against him again?
His race, the race at Cheltenham, it was bizarre in so many ways. The betting for it was bizarre. He was backed off the boards in the week before or coming into the race, and then drifted out to a crazy price on the day. It was 20-1 SP and something like 40 something on the exchange, and then he probably should have won. It was a bizarre race to watch in that way. I don't know. I could be harsh now saying this. I think Aidan Coleman maybe went a tiny bit too soon. As it happens, he's come clear with 2 other horses. They've all been plotted, basically. Langer Dan and An Epic Song and Caprond. The 3 of them they're all well-handicapped horses, and they've come clear in a thoroughly, the Coral Cup, probably, one of the most difficult handicap hurdles to win all season. So that form is, to me, in my eyes, is pretty strong. I'm not surprised he's favourite. He's 6-1 with Boylesports. And I take away your point. I think it's looking like it's going to be quicker ground here. I get it hard to oppose him. And I think 6-1 actually is not a bad price. I'm talking myself into it. I was kind of a bit yellow about the race coming to talk to it, but No Ordinary Joe is there as well. He ran a big race against Rocco in the conditional Martin Pipe conditional race. I think Rocco was a good chance. We're going to talk about him later on the card. And Ordinary Joe is unexposed. But if you think Caprond only got £4 for that run, he went on and won at Punchestown after finishing 4th in the Coral Cup last season when the ground was completely against them. They decided to come to Aintree this time, good to soft ground. In my head, I can see him going off a bit shorter. So I think he could be worth to play at 6-1, yeah.
Yeah, just look at, obviously, he's got a bit of weight. £5 is it in total for finishing third. Caprond on his most recent effort. No Ordinary Joe got £4. Front and second in the market. One that I'd like to mention, Steve, is Martello Tower. Now, through the form lines of Love Envoy, obviously she always targets that listed contest every season, it seems, at Sandown, Martello Sky. She's a nice bit of form on softer ground. We're mentioning that the ground potentially could go soft. If the more rain did come, she would definitely interest me. Interest in Rachel Blackmore has been booked for the ride. She's not overexposed. Lucy Wadham's charged. She's 16-1 in the market. And if you look at the way she's been campaigned this season, she's only had 4 runs, yet to get a header front, but she's been coming down the ratings. She's now rated 137. Her most recent effort was behind Epitante over 2 miles. She's stepping up once again to what I think is her preferred trip, 2.5 miles.
What I would say with Martello Sky, she'd always been campaigned in the listed races, the mare's listed races last season and the beginning of this. And all form does tie in with Molly Ollie's Wishes, the Skelton, who's done the same type of thing. but they've both been below that level recently, and I couldn't quite work out why. And it could just be that the listed race form and the races that they run in, they're not that reliable form-wise. You can get slow pace. They're the same type of horses that keep running against each other. And I think when they come into open handicaps, it's a completely different environment for them, and they're not guaranteed to reproduce it. I certainly accept your point, though, Barry, that both Martello Sky and, as I say, Molly Ollie's Wishes, in theory, handicap-wise, they look really well treated. And they were, in fact, there were two horses I was going to mention in this race. But so the plus side is potentially they're fairly in. The negative for me, that form has been achieved in listed mares races. And it's just the open handicap. It's, as I say, it's a different proposition to them. And I would be a little bit wary. But if they're both big prices, then I don't think you're going to do a deal of damage. And I think it's a race. Campron that you've mentioned that Ronan fancies. The form's there. The form is solid, and I certainly think the Coral Cup form is a better level than the Martin Pipe form. And if you look, there's a number of horses in this race that ran in both of those races at Cheltenham, and I would certainly favour the Coral Cup form. But when you put those horses together that ran in the Coral Cup, they're handicapped basically to dead heat. The handicap has seen that. He's adjusted the weights. So, again, I can't really find an angle in. I thought it was an extremely difficult, wide-open race, and it doesn't make a great deal of appeal to me, betting-wise.
Yeah, one horse that is stepping up and trip again is Sonagino. He won his first handicap of 119. He's obviously in here for Nichols off a mark of 132. Finished 8th in the Greatwood Hurdle. Seemed to disappoint on that occasion, and at Huntington last time, maybe back to some sort of form. But again, he's been busy enough this season, whereas I just think Martella Sky, accept your point, into handicap company, but she's coming here fresh, 76 days off the track. Going to side with her 16-1 each way, Rachel Blackmore in the second race at Aintree. Right, lads, moving on to the 255. Now, I think I've found one in here, and I'm wondering, has Ronan Groome had similar thoughts? Big field here, good group of novices in here. Found a 50, heads the betting at 7-2. What do you like, Mr. Groome?
I like the first horse you mentioned. I'm perhaps unoriginal, an Irish horse favourite, but I think what he did at Naas against Corbett's Cross was pretty impressive. They ran a monster time that day. The two of them came clear. Corbett's Cross has since gone on and, was probably not going to win the Albert Bartlett, but he looked booked for second or third at least when he ran out of the last. Found the 50 is fresh, been kept back for this race. It's noticeable that Gordon has targeted Aintree again like he did last year. He had a couple of Grade 1 winners on the Saturday last year and hit the bar on the Thursday and Friday in a couple of Grade 1s as well. It's noticeable that he has targeted the meeting again. And I think this Found the 50 is unexposed enough that he could be good. He could be quite good, actually. He's already at a level now that he can be competitive in a race like this, but he's got the scope to kick on again, only after a couple of runs over hurdles. I'd be very much against Lucia again, as I was going into Cheltenham, but Nikki's been on saying that she was a bit wrong, or she wasn't 100% going into that race. I'm not completely buying that, and just a more pertinent level. If you look at how those mares ran at Fairyhouse that ran in the Mayor's Novice Hurdle at Cheltenham, they're all quite disappointing. So she might have had a hard race, or the form mightn't be up to much either. So either way, I think she has a bit to find here. And the other horse to mention, obviously, is in the pocket for Henry Bromhead and Rachel Blackmore, who represents the Supreme Novice Hurdle form. I think he might want a bit further. I think he stayed on strongly there in the Supreme, and we'd see him at his best over 2.5 miles last season. And I think this Found the 50's got a turn of foot, which at Aintree can be quite significant. So he's in a favourite. No votes for originality or anything like that, but I think he's pretty solid at the top of the market.
Steve?
I take the point with Found a 50. There were two horses that I thought could have a chance, both Irish trained, that came from outside of the Cheltenham form, that being Found a 50 and a horse called No Looking Back. I watched both of them on their last two races last night. I didn't really know the horses at all. Found a 50, I was pretty impressed with that form, as Ronan's just highlighted. Looks solid with the horse it ran against, running well at Cheltenham. And I quite like No Looking Back at a big price. He did seem to hang in behind the winner in that race. That was at Naas. But he did stick on, and he was giving a chunk of weight away as well. So I think form-wise, I can make a case for him off of that, and certainly with Found a 50. But for me, the horse that does set the standard off the supreme form is In the Pocket. And I think In the Pocket should be favourite off of that. I do accept that there's an argument that maybe he wants further. But looking at that Cheltenham race again, he travelled quite well through the race, seemed to get a little bit out of pace, and it wouldn't surprise me if they tried to ride him a little bit more positively. And I think the Supreme is rock solid form. And I think that, yeah, I would certainly have him, put him in favourite in my market. But I would certainly respect Found a 50 and No Looking Back as the two horses that come from outside of that form that could take a further step forward. I agree with Ronan about Lucia. I think that she's got quite a bit to find. And I think lots of the others have as well. So, yeah, In the Pocket would be my preference.
No Looking Back, Steve. I thought you were going to completely steal the thunder. You said you respect them. I'd massively respect them. So, son of Kingston Hill. Oliver McKiernan. Very, very interesting little stat. It's his first runner in Great Britain since 2014 and his first runner at Aintree since 2012. Doesn't typically bring horses over. And albeit he won an egg, as Ronan Groome would call it, an egg and spoon race down at Limerick behind Brazil, who was... Well, Brazil was conceding £3 on the day on what was really testing ground. But I love the way No Looking Black just went and dispatched him. Brazil went off 2-9 favourite on that occasion. And No Looking Back, albeit he was receiving £3. I mean, the winner was rated 143, the Boodles winner from Cheltenham last season. And then he's come out and he's given £9 to Irish Point. And I thought it was a really eye-catching one. It was only beaten a length and 3 parts. Irish Point has since got up a couple of pounds to 148. He was only beaten ahead, of course, in the Royal Bond to what went on to be the Supreme Novice Hurdle winner, Marine Nationale. I think the form is absolutely rock solid. And No Looking Back, he's a double-figure price. He's been clipped to 14-1 from 16-1 from Boylesports. I think he's a massive each-way chance. You have 14 runners here. Obviously, it's really competitive. I think you're right about In the Pocket. Probably deserves to be favoured on his run at Cheltenham. Lucia, bubble burst, I think, at Cheltenham last time. I think she is talented, but I couldn't be trusting her. I think 4-1 is plenty short after what she done. Altabelli's interesting. Just worry about his level of experience for Harry Fry coming into this. And also stepping back and trip. I'm not entirely sure he needs a step back and trip. He shaped like 2.5 miles. Last time was probably what he needs. I think No Looking Back at the prices. I think he's probably the best bet on the card each way. I think he's set up for a massive, massive run. And I think just maybe because of the connections, he's been a little bit disrespected here, Steve.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. All that's perfectly valid. As I mentioned, he did. Looking at him, that was the only slight cause for concern. When they jumped the last, he went to challenge Irish Point. And did seem just to hang in behind. But that could be down to inexperience as well. I wouldn't, hold that too harshly against them.
I think ground as well is not going to be an issue to him. Obviously, he's won on heavy, he's won on soft, and he's also won on decent ground, good to soft ground. So obviously he's a bumper winner as well. And I think he jumps well enough to be in the picture. And the turn of foot, I think, is probably something he has in his arsenal.
Yeah. Well, as we keep harking back to, it all revolves around the price. And as you say, it's a double figure price, 14-1, 16-1 when I looked last night. and I certainly wouldn't put you off of backing him at that price.
Best bet on the card for me at the prices. There you go. 3:30. We're moving on swiftly to what is the Melling Chase, Grade 1, 2.5 miles. Fakir Dudari was very, very impressive in this last season. And for me, looks the one to beat once again this year. Steve?
The race revolves totally around him, I think. But what happened at Ascot? And that's
wasn't
what
knocked about anyway.
But it's they've put the cheek pieces on him now, so at least you can see that they're doing something positive to get him back to his form. But he's won the race the last 2 years. Last year, really impressive. He beat Hitman last year. If he runs to that level, and you forget Ascot, then he's going to take the world a beating. And I think with them putting the headgear on, I would be prepared to make allowances for that defeat at Ascot. And maybe the horse wasn't as he should have been. And obviously he finished behind Pic D'Orhy at Ascot. So you're having to think, well, will he turn that form around? But he was so far below what he could run to that, as I say, with the cheek pieces on, I'm prepared to forgive him that. And again, it revolves around the price. I think him and Pic D'Orhy, they had them pretty much joint favourites. And at joint favourites, I would still favour Fakir Dudari.
Yeah, like I mean, this is once again probably been the plan all season. From we spoke about that yesterday. I mean, this has been this horse's big target for the year. And when you take into consideration that, I mean, you know, he's finished 30 lengths behind Galloping the Champ, isn't a total disgrace. I mean, he's run well. Obviously, beat French Dynamite. That race kind of fell into his lap, didn't it? At Turles with Hot on Color falling, and he was certainly looking like the winner at the time. And when you take, for example, that we mentioned Shishkin, that was probably a career best from him at Ascot, and Pic D'Orhy has been running very, very well on probably top of the ground for most of his racing this season. And he's had plenty of racing. He's been pretty busy, Pic D'Orhy. And for me, cheek pieces, as you mentioned, Fakir Dudari, 9-4 of the skinny ones on Friday's card. For me, I think he's set up for a big one once again. I think it'd be hard to beat, Ronan. What do you think?
I'm not as convinced as you boys, I have to say. I'm not as willing to forgive the very poor run at Ascot, where he didn't really seem to be going a yard. Like, he was beaten a long, long way out there, and it's not like him. He's a horse that usually runs his good, solid, consistent 160, hard knocking 160 horse. He's often labelled as. The fact that they're reaching for the headgear here, I'm not would suggest as well that they were, you know, a bit surprised by that run the last day and trying something new now, rather than it just being a blip. So I would be willing to take him on here, of respecting the fact that he's been saved for this race and won the race the last 2 years and is usually rock solid. But that would put me off the way he ran so poorly there. Harry Cobden has chosen to ride Pic D'Orhy, and I'm perplexed with that, I have to say. I've never been a huge fan of the horse. I'm not convinced he's a grade 1 animal. He's had like 4 or 5 goes at grade 1s, and he's never convinced. Like, obviously, the best he did was the last day. He was 16 lengths away from Shishkin. That's okay. That's an okay run. He finished in front of Fakir Dudari's, but I don't think Fakir Dudari's ran his race there. Hitman hasn't won a grade 1 either, but he has ran to a better level, including at this course. He ran well in this race last year to Fakir Dudari's. Now, granted, I'm going to hold my hand up, and everyone will be saying it with Hitman. He's not the most resolute, but I thought he ran pretty solid race in the Ryanair.
I was shocked how well he ran, considering his season to date. I was shocked.
Yeah, and when you go right back to the start of the season, one of his best runs was actually here, and he's giving a lump of weight away to Riders on the Storm off a mark of 159 in the Money Garden race. Look, he's not the most resolute. He's going to need a kind of a kidding kind of ride, and the fact that Harry Cobden isn't riding him obviously is a negative in that regard. Although Lorcan Williams, I'm sure, can.
Did he bleed after the King George? Was that a report? Did he bleed this season? He definitely bled anyway at some point, did he?
Yeah, he bled from his nose after the King George, but he's ran fine. Like the Ryanair run was fine since, and he probably doesn't stay to 2.7.5 at Newbury. Look, I can't have it that Harry Cobden, this was a straightforward choice for him. I think there probably would have been a flip of the coin between him and Picdory, and I'm just not convinced I picked Dory. And the market has reacted in a way of suggesting that it probably was more of a clear-cut choice. And that would lead me to think that any price around 9 to 2 or 5 to 1. It's just a pity we don't have the ace here to play him. But that would just tempt me into Hitman here. A quick mention of a French dynamo who ran a cracker in the Ryanair. I'm just not convinced now. He's just right up to Grade 1 standard either. And he's obviously got to reverse the form around with Hitman as well. So I'm not. It would be like a half point kind of thing for me. But for a bit of interest, I'm gonna take a swing at Hitman.
Just getting back to what Ronan said, I priced this race up. I've got Hitman and Picdory pretty much the same type of price. I marginally favour Picdory, but not by much. But that's why I said the race revolves around Facaduderi, because once you're fancying Hitman and you're not too keen on Picdory, well, Hitman, could he revert? If Facaduderi runs like he did last year, he can't reverse that form. I couldn't see Hitman beating him. He'd beaten, fairly and squarely by him. But it's like, what price do you put on Facaduderi? And Ronan's like wanting to be against him because of that. The cheap pieces obviously have gone on because connections were convinced that he's not run to what they were expecting. But I would take it as more as a positive that they're actually doing something about it, rather than let him take his chance again without doing anything visually. At least we can see they've got the cheap pieces on, and if they work, then for me, he would have to. And that's why I've put him in marginal favourite. Okay.
Let's have a bit of fun, lads. It's time to head for the national course. It is, of course, the Topham, the 405, over 2.5 miles. And the favourite Ashtown lad, 8 to 1 at the top of the market, was a winner over the national fences, of course, in the Boylesports Beecher earlier on in the season, and has ran a couple of times since over hurdle. He's 8 to 1 at the top of the market. Gaskell always gives a good account of himself over the big fences, 8 to 1. Al Dancer, also a winner over the larger Aintree fences this season, 9 to 1 in the betting. And final orders 9 to 1. Burrows Saint 10 to 1. Hot Galore 10 to 1. El Redondo 11s and there's 14 to 1 and bigger. The rest. Steve, going to come to you first on the Topham.
Yeah, we got it makes little appeal again. It's so difficult. Obviously, the two that you mentioned at the front of the market, Ashtown Lad, Gaskill, at the weights, there's nothing to choose between them. They both jumped round this course. They finished first and second against each other in that Beecher, but that was over the 3-mile trip. They're dropping back to 2.5. Which one will be more effective? I'm not too sure. There were a couple of horses that I thought at big prices, it wouldn't surprise me to see them go well. Both Nichols horses. He's got El Redondo. That's around a 12 to 1 chance. Cobden rides that. On my figures, I thought he's on a fair handicap mark, and he's the type of horse that may take to these fences. So I would leave him in. And they've got one that Bryony Frost rides, Kel Dastan. Another one that I think is on a fair mark. But to be honest, Barry, I think, you could get, you could run through the entire field and through various bits of form, you can make some type of case for them. And I just found it a very, very difficult race, wide open affair. And I certainly wouldn't want to be backing anything at a single figure price. And I think we've got how many Irish challenges? Is it around a dozen Irish challenges there that I've not really been able to evaluate their type of chance either. So over to you.
You want one at a big price, do you? How does 28 to 1 do you?
That'll do nicely.
There's a horse in there at, Johnny Burke has taken the ride. There's a jockey I massively respect, very, very brave rider. And I think The Machine, number 18 for Kerry Lee, whose horses are running quite well. And the key to this horse is all his best form has been fresh. Two of his 3 career victories over fences have come when he's been off the track for quite some time. He's only a pound higher than his last winning marks. He's been coming down the weights. Interested that I'd say Kerry Lee always thought this horse was going to be a national type almost. Horse that would his best form would be over 3 miles plus. I think it's very interesting that they're stepping him back and trip to 2.5 miles. A really sound jumper. He'll be up there on the pace, so likes to be ridden prominent. Has never been over the. It's always a worry. Obviously, we don't know how this horse is going to handle the Aintree, the national fences. But I think 2.5 miles is coming in here reasonably fresh again. 76 days since his most recent effort. By Flemings for digging the ground. Should it rain? As we're expecting, up to 5 mils of rain. I think off 137 could potentially be well handicapped, and I do think the big national fences might just suit him and light him up. So Demachine at 28-1, I'm going to put forward as an each way selection. Johnny Burke on board for Kerry Lee, who has ridden the horse in the past. But just so interesting. Ashtown Lad, he looked more like a national contender than a Topham contender. So interesting, he goes here front end of the market. Obvious claims. But so many in here. How will they handle the fences? I suppose, Ronan, is the big question.
Very much so, and that would be the reason for me leaning towards those horses that are unsurprisingly priced towards the top of the market, like Ashtown Lad, like Jess Keel, that have proven course and distance form around the place. I quite like Al Dancer here, as it's not the fancy sort of price you're putting up, Basil, but I think he's pretty solid in a race where with so many question marks over a lot of them. Granted, I know there's 30 runners here and you're taking a single figure price isn't ideal, but basically he's been trained for the race all season, as in he came here earlier in the season, he won the Grand Sefton by a nose from Jess Gill. The pair of them came clear. That race has worked out quite well. Lifetime Ambition was in behind him, then went on to run well in the Troytown next time out. 2 for Gold has won since, and the horses Jess Gill and Percussion went on to finish second and third again to Ashtown Lad in the Beecher later that month. Well, whereas El Dancer has just been put away by Sam Thomas, who we've come to know was a very good target trainer. He's only gone up 5 pounds. He's only had that was his first start over the fences over this course and distance. He's been reinvented to a certain extent, because when he was with Nigel Twiston-Davies, he's mostly kept at Cheltenham, but Sam Thomas has found him away around Aintree and kind of reinvented the horse to an extent. He's lightly enough raced still, and as I said, he's been put up for this all season. So Boylesports, I think, going the top 5 there. Each way is an option there, and I think he's pretty solid. I will give one other quick mention, Basil, to Hot on Callure, who I think could probably hold his own in the 2.5 mile Grade 1. He ran quite well at Cheltenham. He was 5th there to Seddon, off top weight again. Townend is on him here for Willie, who's won this race 2 out of the last 3 years as well. I think he could be a Grade 1 horse next year. So mark 157 is obviously, it's stiff ask, but I can see him running well, and a classy horse can get around here a lot easier than used to be the old days. So, yeah. But Al Dancer is the one I'm going to go with.
Okay, man, let's crack on. Penultimate race on the card, 40 contest over the 3.5 miles of furlong for the novices, Grade 1, top of the market, 11-4. Now, Steve, I said before the race, before we kicked off the podcast, that I'm going to write down what I think might be your best fancy of the day. I have written it down on a piece of paper. Don't let me down.
So the favourite has to be Yoroko for me, because I think he could improve. Are you right or wrong?
I had it in this race. I had actually written down Stay Away Fair, but when I looked at it a second time, he's either gone for Stay Away Fair or Yoroko. So it doesn't surprise me. Go on.
Right. So obviously you've got the Albert Bartlett form. With Stay Away Fair was left clear when Corbett's cross ran out. And that form is, for me, absolutely solid. So that comes into it. I think what I like, though, about Yoroko is that he really looked in trouble in that race at Cheltenham. Coming down the hill, he was outpaced, being ridden along. But after, I thought he looked beat going to the last. But when he hit the front, he stayed on and was going away at the line and was really strong at the finish. And for me, I think that level of form as it stands, albeit handicap form, I think that level of form as it stands is at a similar level to Stay Away Faye. And I just think the stepping up in trip could bring about some marked improvement. He just looked an out stay.
What price did you have him in at?
I didn't price this race up as yet because there were a couple. Well, there were 4 horses apart from Morocco, all stepping up in trip, and I hadn't sort of done those in any great detail. But all 4 of the others that are stepping up would need to improve to get to Morocco's level as it stands. But I think Morocco if you just take that last run at Cheltenham as the base level, that sets the standard. My argument is that he's got further improvement to come. And so I can't, looking at it again, I couldn't see how it wouldn't suit him. And he's lightly raced horse. He was put back for that race at Cheltenham, wasn't he? He was aimed at that. Providing he doesn't go backwards from that, then I'm sure that he's going to run well. And for that reason, I would have him in favourite over Stay Away Faye.
Absolutely love the way this horse is being campaigned, and it'd be a surprise if he wasn't a Grade 1 animal. Even looking at the, I suppose, prior winners of the Martin Pipe, it's always turned up a very, very good horse, and won a shade cozy at the line, didn't he? Absolutely did. I think you're right. I think it's between them two, Stay Away Faye and Rocco. As you mentioned, a couple of horses that are stepping up in trip that we don't know. The likes of St. Davy, I thought was interesting for John J. O'Neill, but is he maybe more next year's horse over a fence, St. Davy? In terms of this particular contest, Rocco, the way he hit the line, as you said, I mean, he really did win cozy enough. And look, I suppose the one negative, I don't even know would you call it a negative, but he is just a 5-year-old. It's a quick turnaround, but it's the same with all these horses. How are they going to handle the turnaround from Cheltenham to Aintree? I'm sure, given the horse's profile and the way they've minded this horse to date, they wouldn't be running him this quick if they didn't think he was able to cope with it. So he's beaten a rock solid handicapper there, very, very snug at the line, no ordinary Joe, and looked like stepping up in trip to 3 miles is going to be exactly what he needs. Very lightly raced, unbeaten this season as well. Rocco, Ronan, can he stay unbeaten?
I think he's got every chance. I went back and watched the Martin Pipe again. Like if you go to the last and pause it and think, okay, well, who's going to win from here? Like the last person at the top 3 you're picking, or the last horse at the top 3 you're picking is Rocco. Absolutely devoured the ground for Aidan Kelly.
I loved it, yeah. 2
runners, like he's literally, with his closing sectional there was something very, very smart. It would make you believe that coming up to this trip will definitely suit. He's jumping forward with each run, and look, it is a big step up. It's a handicap going to a Grade 1, and it's going from Cheltenham to Aintree. That would slightly temper me a bit, but I'd say I'd just about give him the vote here at around 11-2 mark as well. Probably not as strong as you boys, but I think he's just about to play here. Like Stay Away Faye is unexposed, but there's an interesting horse who actually beat him the last day in Maximilian for Donald McCain. Comes here fresh. That's often a horse that can go well in this type of race. And it's very hard to get.
And hated the ground as well. The last day hated the ground and still managed to beat Stay Away Faye. Has had second run back after a wind up as well, Ronan.
Yeah, and I'm sure Steve will tell you this would be Donald McCain's type of meeting as well. He likes to keep a lot of his horses for Aintree, so would have swerved Cheltenham on purpose to keep this horse back for this race. Brian Hughes taking the ride, so I wouldn't write him off at all. Obviously, the top 2 in the market are respected. Stay Away Faye, but the Albert Bartlett winners who come to this race, it's a mixed kind of record at best. It's a tough race often, the Albert Bartlett. Absolute Notions, obviously, his form ties in quite well with Stay Away Fayas, and he finished ahead of, or he finished just in behind Standard Clegane. He went on to run well in the Albert Bartlett when he was running at Leopardstown. He's been kept back like this for this race again by Gordon, who's obviously got a very strong team for the week, as we were mentioning earlier on. What's tempering my enthusiasm, lads, is the big field here. You know, it's hard to make a case for a lot of these runners. They're all unexposed, the British contingent, and it's hard to get a read on them. But could there be a high senior in there lurking that type of profile when he came in and won this race? Possibly. It's very hard to pick that out. So it's a tentative vote for Iroko for me at the prices.
Yeah, I think Iroko will win. I think Stay Away Fail be second. How ambitious, lads, going for the four. I think their level of form is much better than the rest here. Stay Away Fail, just to mention, made all virtually in an Albert Bartlett. I think he got a bit tired after the last. So, as you mentioned, will this have left a mark on him? Is a question. Pretty mixed record of Albert Bartlett winners going on to Aintree, but Iroko for me, Steve, still progressive, unbeaten this season, and stepping into greater company. I think he's well up to it.
Yeah, I think. Well, I just would mention Maximilian, who Ronan said. I think this is a horse. They have targeted Aintree with it, but any easing of the ground wouldn't be in the horse's favour. I think they've always thought he is. You mentioned the form tying in earlier on in the season, but he does want better ground to be at his best. So that, and he would need to step forward on what he's achieved today. And I think good ground, maybe you could make an argument for that. The ground, I think, may just be even good to soft, may be a bit too easy too easy for him. So I keep coming back to Iroko. It's it's obviously it's price orientated. Our select horses that I want to bet, but Absolute Notions that Ronan mentioned that's tying in with Stay Away Faye, that's collateral form line. I've got nothing to choose between them. They're joint favourites pretty much, whereas Iroko was third or fourth in the market. So I think Iroko should be favourite. That's what
Okay. Concluding race on the entry card, the 5:15. It is obviously for the amateurs, and Jamie Codd riding for Ollie Murphy. Go Dante, cheek pieces on for the first time, fourth run of the season, big spring target. We had Ollie Murphy on the podcast earlier in the season. I asked him for one horse for the spring, and he said Go Dante. Snug enough winner last time, I thought, Steve. Deserving favourite and 7-1. Still a bit of juice in that.
Can I be perfectly honest and say I haven't got a clue, because it's just, again, so many chances. Lots of these horses are exposed, but I thought lots of them looked to be on reasonable handicap marks on what they achieved if they ran to their best. And there were a couple that I thought looked to be on the downgrade that all of a sudden came back to form last time. I didn't know what to put in favourite. I went through it in quite a bit of detail, and I really didn't know. The only conclusion I came to, again, as we said with the earlier handicap, I certainly wouldn't want to be backing anything at under 10-1.
Yeah, okay. Okay, fair enough. Ollie Murphy, Ronan Groome has a couple in here. Ukantango, another one to mention. Go Dante at the top of the market. Seems to have a good hand in here. Steve's probably right, but still at the in terms of the price thing. But 7-1 Go Dante, it just did stick out for me. I think he could be still well handicapped.
Yeah, he did. Was a highly touted horse towards the start of his career as well, and maybe just coming good now. Ollie Murphy's horse is running quite well also. Jamie Codd is quite an interesting booking. I don't know if you saw, Jamie Codd was on with Kevin Blake on Sky Sports Racing earlier in the week, and he said he wasn't coming over to Aintree. There's nothing for him, and he's since picked up a ride today in the bumper. For John Queally, I think, and he's been booked here as well. So it just goes to show you what sometimes these jockeys
just on Go Dante, Ronan, just before, because on Go Dante he did have his issues earlier on in the season, so there was reasons for how poorly he ran. I think there was some sort of a medical issue with the horse. Can't totally recall, but nothing too serious. And obviously he's been dropping in the handicap mark to 122, won by 3 lengths when last seen at Wetherby on soft ground. The juice in the ground isn't going to bother him. And he's only got £5 for that. Jamie Codd booked. I think it's interesting now.
Yeah, I absolutely can see why he's in there at the top of the market. But as Steve says, this is seriously competitive. And another just quick word on Queel. I was at Leopardstown when she won, and Ted Walsh were kind of asking him where's she going to run next, and he's like, the owner wants to go to this race in Aintree, and he didn't sound convinced at all. So it's interesting that she runs as well. And Nibiru obviously I think has a big call on the Gaelic Warrior form. He was second. Tony Martin's horses are running quite well. He's a couple of winners at Fairyhouse there. Ben Harvey taking the ride, probably pound for pound in this race, the best value jockey around. So I give him a chance. The one I am going to stick with though, and I say pound for pound, Aidan Kelly's got to be up there as well. He's riding Glon here for Gordon Elliott. You have to go back a bit to his Galway run, but he was fourth there to Tudor City, or she, I should say, was fourth there to Tudor City, which was a big run. She can run off just a couple of pounds higher over in Britain, and I'd be surprised if she wasn't trained for this now, given an old racecourse gallop or something to have them come on. As we've mentioned before on the podcast, Gordon has got a pretty strong team for Aintree this year. The fact that she's going over for this, she's likely enough raced over hurdles. I gave her a chance.
Bets on the Aintree Day 2 card. Shall I start?
Go.
Give you a bit of time. Okay, Fakir Dudari, of those at the shorter prices, I think 9-4 is more than fair for him. I will be backing him. Iroko, 11-2. That's definitely more than fair. And my best bet of the entire card at the prices, 14-1, still available on No Looking Back for the novice hurdle. I think it has a cracking chance for a trainer who very rarely brings the horse to Aintree, or the UK for that matter, Oliver McKiernan. Steve, best bets on the card?
I think Iroko should, I put it in favourite. So Iroko would have to be my pick in the 440. So I agree with you there, Barry, and I'd be really disappointed if the horse didn't go very, very close.
Mr. Groome?
I must confess, I put my hand up, and with No Looking Back, I had him on my short list, and I must confess a schoolboy error of not realising that the horse was conceding £9 to Irish Point last time, which was a fair effort. Of course, my thing that tempered my enthusiasm with him was that was a slowly run race, but I probably will have a few quid on him now, especially after the case you boys made for him. But my best bet of the day is going to be Camprond in the second race. I think he's still well handicapped off the mark of 143, and I think it's significant that they're running him here instead of going to Punchestown, which suggests to me the horse is in good spirits, good form, and I think that Coral Cup form is pretty strong in the context of this race.
Super. Well, we'll be on to Grand National chat tomorrow, lads. Look forward to that. Have two picked out a bigger price, as I was telling Steve yesterday, but we shall share it tomorrow. We're recording at 10:30 on Friday for day 3 of Aintree. Make sure to get in all your 7 selections, your picks for each of the races on day 2. 3 winners or more qualifies you for the draw. We'll be doing some draws on tomorrow's show. If anyone wants, by the way, to check out Steve's website as well, or get in touch, you'll see his full details on the screen. We'll be back tomorrow to look ahead to the Aintree National. And if you are new around here, make sure to hit the like and subscribe to the channel for plenty more previews like this. So
50 yards, this is a special pair, and it's a hands full of grace. And it's Energumen opening up a clear advantage in the closing stages. A breath of fresh air over fences is going to stay at the helm of the 2 mile novices. Energumen by
Boylesports has it all. Money back meetings every day. UK and Irish racing live streaming. Extra places and money back all losers offers. And a bet 10 get 40 welcome offer. Boylesports, this is betting.